Hello and welcome to another Jump Advisory recruitment discussion. As always, if you can hear us as people start to join into the webinar, if you can just put your name in the chat box that you can hear us, that'd be brilliant. So this week we're addressing data and why data is the new currency when procuring new clients and maintaining and developing your existing ones. Big data, a word that's often cast around, and it's become sort of a bit of a buzzword, but we can't ignore it now as recruitment businesses. Studies have shown that big data will change the way that new applications are developed. It will refine the concept of information services and how we put information out to our clients, and it will improve our existing sales to our clients and what we're doing. So the ability to help businesses better understand and predict market trends will come from big data, looking at how clients spend, their behaviors, and the complete changes in the business world is coming all from the drive of big data. However, the true power of big data in recruitment lies in its ability to combine historic data with customer insight and consolidate all that relevant information, helping you source and build and procure new clients in a quantifiable way so you can make proper informed decisions and they can make informed decisions about who they use. So this week we're joined by the Chief Fish of Firefish CRM, Wendy McDougall. And Firefish, as we know, is a leading recruitment CRM, founded by Wendy. She's over 20 years in the recruitment market. She's run her own agency before setting up Firefish in 2010. So over the next 45 minutes, we are going to grill Wendy on why data is now so important. And she's going to tell us how we can use data to build existing client relationships, increase the desire to buy from our new prospects. So please feel free to ask questions as we go along. The Jump team of Paul, Dave, and Paul, myself will be adding our experience into this as well. So all that leads me to say is welcome, Wendy. Welcome to Jump Advisory. So let's dive straight in. Clients' view agencies, or the client's view of agencies have changed over the years, especially over the last 12 months, and data is now the new currency. So what type of data are clients requesting from you as a CRM provider to help them open new doors?
Hi, and thanks everybody for having me online. I know this is the Jump panel way of getting back to me because I've been delighted to have a number of them on my crowdcast, and now they get 45 minutes to grill me. So welcome. And data is one of my it's one of my passions actually, and hence why a CRM is all around data. And if you do look at it, recruitment businesses are data businesses, and I'm not quite sure we connect with that as the recruitment sector. So in terms of the CRM side of it, I think we're getting right now in the last year, we're getting hit with, everyone's gone remote. So that's quite a scary thing for the recruitment agency because they're used to being able to see everybody there and what they're doing. So it's very much sort of how do they manage a virtual team just with activities. So that was the first hit in of really then data. It's now started to change as the market's starting to gear back up, and the demand is now looking at how do we use data to go out and open doors. So I think that's where I've seen the change. Last year was all about productivity. Now it's about looking at data that can help make everybody money and open doors from leads.
So when we start to look at that, open doors and make money from leads, talk about the data that you would sort of use then to help open doors.
Yeah, well, I think if you think back in terms of when we were probably all recruiting a long time ago, data was the little black book. That was the sort of magic. A recruiter has these contacts with their, their network. And then actually what happened with the invention of, job boards at that time, because then it became very easy to get data. So actually going out and just filling a database with lots of data isn't that hard now. But what that means is it's not that hard for your clients to do exactly the same. So they can get the data that's out there as well. So what's now happened is that you need to have the relationship with data. You need to use that data, and it's all about quality. So how can you demonstrate that you have the quality data rather than just everybody that they can put on a spreadsheet themselves to your clients? So I suppose if this is an opportunity, I can just sort of show a little bit of an idea as to how I used to do it using Firefish as my business in order to generate results. Is that okay just to share just now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Okay, so if I just go and take over. So what I did was on a monthly basis. And this is very old. So this is back like 2012 when I used to do this, but it worked so well, is called a monthly insight. Now, effectively, I did a little overview. My sector was the Scottish tech sector. That's the one that I wanted to dominate. So that was the one that I wanted to be fairly credible. I wanted to be the credible agency to go there for the tech sector. And I just then looked at, in terms of, I was able to look at my data, find out what the average salary was. Had it changed? Is there a difference in Glasgow, Edinburgh, Aberdeen, the areas that I covered? And then where were the top skills that we were then looking at? And then it's about visualizing that and making it easy to digest. So what you're really doing there is, a client would be looking at this going, okay, cool, I can benchmark a salary. Oh, these guys know their stuff. You know, awesome. Okay, I can look at the contract rates, etc. as well. I can see what's happening in the job market. By doing that and showing that movement, that generated me a ton of leads. So I could use that to then open doors with clients I didn't know, and also just give the credibility to my clients that I was using, that I was the person to come to. So whenever they had a role, I wanted them to think of my business and Wendy McDougall that would then fill that business for me.
Wendy, if I could just sort of jump in here. I mean, I think what you've said is, you talk about this being sort of old school, but actually, I mean, it's about as relevant today as it's ever been, in fact, potentially more so. I think clients are just generally fed up to the back teeth of getting CVs chucked at them and cold calls. I think anyone, we talk clients, I think we all are. And I think if you are, we had Neil on from the REC a few weeks ago, Neil Carberry, the CEO of the REC, talking about the fact that these days data is king. He was pretty much saying that, and what we should be doing is sending information to clients to engage with them in order that they will see us in our individual sectors or markets as experts, using information that we think is relevant and salient from their perspective. And that's precisely what you're saying here. This is saying the same thing. This is taking information that's going to provide some useful guidance to our customers. And of course, because they see you as valuable as an expert, they're naturally going to give you their business, or at least they will do if you ask for it. So I think this is in essence what you're saying here, isn't it?
Yeah, it's my one mantra for everybody, is that right now, adding value to everybody. And then, it's I love, what goes around comes around. And that's my main sort of phrase. If you do business in that way, then it will come back to you. And I think that's a nice way of being able to do business. But Paul, picking up on that, you're absolutely right. People are just fed up of getting CVs, because that CV is not worth the price tag that a recruiter is actually trying to charge. Actually, we've got to shift away from that CV and demonstrate that the process, the service, the network, and data is part of that, is what the client is paying you to do. So start focusing on selling that part, not the end result, which is a CV that they can go and get a LinkedIn profile, and they can't differentiate in terms of that value of your CV and somebody they could just go and download from LinkedIn, for example.
So I've said for years and years that being a consultant, we call ourselves recruitment consultants. We don't say recruitment CV chuckers.
No, definitely not.
And being a consultant means providing expert advice. And whether that's verbal or, in the case, as you've demonstrated here, it's data that provides useful, valuable information to clients is an irrelevance. The fact is that you're providing knowledge, and I think that's the important element here, isn't it? To engage with people. The interesting thing about this is that, despite the fact we've all been saying this for a very long time, and as you've demonstrated, this was something you were doing back in your day in the, as a recruitment consultant, very few people do it. It doesn't, and I've been saying this for a long time, it doesn't take much to distance yourself from your competitors.
You are so right, and it's so easy, and everybody looks at that and thinks, oh gosh, that must cost a fortune. It's so not either. Effectively, you have the fixed searches and reports built up in your CRM. You export that, you put it into a set sort of format in terms of the data, and then you go to Fiverr, which is every week, and they just go and put it to mock up into a design. And once you've paid it for once, then you just put it in and it creates itself. So it's a very easy thing to then repeat for very low expense. I mean, that whole thing probably cost me at one point £100 to produce, and then it was repeat. And then every 6 months, I then thought I'll freshen it up again. I'll get a couple of bits more data that's relevant for that theme, and I'll get somebody to give me a new graph. It's not expensive to do this. And suddenly you jump in that sort of vision of a client and your experience there.
And we've said this for years, that something that's low value for us, meaning it doesn't take much, or it doesn't cost much, doesn't take a lot of time, is seen as higher value by the client. It's an interesting comparison.
I've always said that the recruitment sector, unfortunately, as being part of it as well for many years, we didn't charge, we offered so many of the valuable things for free. And actually now, the stuff that we did for free is the stuff that a client really values right now and would pay for.
Yeah. Well, can I ask you, because you've been on both sides of the fence. So you're running a CRM business, a data business, but you're also being an agency. When agency leaders interview new consultants, rarely have I ever seen them ask a question about how they use data.
You know, that is a great point.
Why is that? What's the gap between we know that it matters, but we don't use it as a tool to ask them when we're hiring them? Why is that?
You know, Dave, I think if anybody's listening out there, if they take that one gem away today and put that into their recruitment process, that is brilliant. And it's a great question, why not? And there is just such an ingrained, you know, ultimately just now, we are forced to change as an industry. I think that's great in the last year because of what's happened. But, you know, it's almost like, oh, if it's not, you know, if not broke, let's not fix it. And our sector has been so far behind other sectors in the use of data, in the use of technology, and the use of change. So the mentality that we've all grown up with and now leading businesses are very much, you know, go in, you're a salesperson, go in, just work hard, make your sales calls, get your CVs out. So they haven't, just when I started there and I said, recruitment businesses are data businesses. We don't see as a sector as data businesses, and that's the change that also has to happen. So they're just thinking that there's a sales engine and they've got a number of CVs to sell. That's not it any longer.
Wendy, I don't know whether you found this, but I've worked in-house and I can remember when you go in-house, you start to get starved of data a little bit. And so some of the best relationships I had with some of the agencies that were on the PSL were the ones that gave me things that, being honest, just made me look better internally, or gave me access to data information that I didn't know, taught me things that I could then go and sit in front of a hiring manager and be, you know, a lot more credible, because you just can't cover off every role when you're working in-house. I was always really grateful, but I think the key thing, and it looks like you've done it in your research, it's about making sure it's data that is valuable to that client rather than just any data, because otherwise people get lost a little bit, don't they, because there's so much data out there.
Definitely, and we talked about that on our crowdcast as well, and I loved what you were saying there, because it's another thing that we take for granted, is that the privilege that we have as a recruiter, so going back to when we were recruiters, Paul, the privilege that we get to see what's happening in the whole market. And we get that, you know, those companies that we work with, it's such a privilege to be able to invite in, understand the inside workings of that business, and then be able to support that business to grow. How exciting is that? But we probably take that for granted a little. And then when you do go in-house, or when I'm now, you know, on the other side as well, you absolutely miss that sort of insight as to how all the other companies are working. And that's another thing that the recruitment sector underestimates how valuable that is for being an agency, because that is gold dust. When I started, just tell you a wee story in terms of, you know, when I sold my, you know, the agency business, and then I really started to expand on Firefish. So this is around 2015. So we had some seed financing and we were starting to really grow. So we grew by probably 25, 28 heads that year, which is a lot of growth. Now I worked with my old agency to support that. You know, from a loyalty point of view, obviously, but at that point, I didn't want to pay them for an agent, you know, for a CV. I wanted to pay them to develop my employer brand. I wanted to pay them to go and tell everybody that Firefish was the place to go. I wanted them to, every person they interviewed, send them a gift from Firefish. And that's what I wanted to pay them for, because that would make my hiring long-term, brilliant. And so it was really weird, because even my old agency were like, I don't know how to charge you for this, because it wasn't, the end result would come because of all the activity. And, at one point, I had a big billboard up with just the fish, in Glasgow, but it was in commuting areas. And that's what I wanted to pay for, not a CV.
Yeah.
So I think when we talk, go on, sorry, Paul.
And just to reinforce that, even though you're saying that that's something that you used and it was a few years ago, I can absolutely tell you I was using something very similar only 7 months ago. And some of the clients that I'm working with now, I'm working with, again, providing something similar, just something slightly different. So it absolutely works. And I swear by it. And Wendy, you and I discussed this triangle of trust, when we last spoke. You can't build trust on a relationship when you haven't got a relationship to start with. But the one thing you can do is build a relationship based on logic and data, because that will start to elevate your credibility. So if you're not using this, I can only tell you, this was my holy grail of winning new business and growing market share within your existing clients as well, only 7 months ago. It really, really was.
So as we move on sort of into the next question, because obviously that's sort of created a lot of conversation, the first question, I remember being at CP, Computer People, part of the Adecco group, and I remember, every year we produce a huge, great coffee table manual that would be all about the salaries and what's gone on every year. And it took them probably 5 to 6 months to procure the data out of the system. Then they go to the Office of National Statistics, they go to the REC, and they pull all this data together and they write this big book. And we would go out and we'd do a roadshow to all the clients. And these roadshow were absolutely packed. I remember doing one in Edinburgh at Holyrood. We had about 150 clients in, and we had a huge, great fight between two clients who were arguing about the data, and it was just really interesting on what went on there. And so the difference then is that we can now extract that data very quickly and efficiently from our CRM, and then use it very, very quickly. So that could be a quarterly, a bi-monthly, almost a monthly update that you could be supplying to your clients. So when developing existing clients, what do you think the data is required for that, Wendy, when we start to look at developing existing clients?
Well, it was actually just to pick up on that one as well. It's quite interesting, because you're absolutely right. There's lots of different data points there as well. So another little trick that I did, just picking up on your more intense annual survey, I went to that was the sort of one I was able to do very cheaply in terms of monthly, great value from a lead generation. But on an annual basis, another part is, align yourself with trade bodies, align yourself with the sector, experts in terms of looking after your sector, and then work with them in order to do then a big annual stats there as well, because you have access to their membership, so they can come in and do that, and you've got credibility from, the background market insight you've done. I did that as well with Scotland IS. And we did then an event that we were able to launch the actual annual survey like that as well. And once you're able to, again, these things don't have to be that expensive to do, but that is a great, a great initiative there in terms of, and I think, the trade body are still doing it, and they've done it for the last 15 years now. And it runs really well from that point of view. So sorry, your original question then, Howard, in terms of, I sidetracked just there because you sparked me off to saying, yeah, that was another thing I did.
So sidetrack away. That's what it's all about. I'll bring you back in when we need to go further down the road. But what we're talking about is, the big question that we get from clients is, we've got to develop our existing client base, because it's either shrinking or flatlining. So what data would you sort of be extracting out to help develop your existing client base?
Okay, so I think there's two ways. I mean, obviously, in terms of what you want to do is demonstrate the value that you're already providing. So you have to then sort of allow them to be able to see all the activity you're probably doing, rather than just the sort of end results. Now, what you can also, so that's the easy stuff. And actually, I think that most people that's sitting on a PSL or an MSP poll or an RPO any of those ones, you're probably like locked into, the different sort of reporting structure that a client dictates to you. So you just have to make sure that you do that really well. However, what's probably happened in the last year is that you've actually had a lot of clients not hiring. So a lot of the activity there and the demand of sort of that sort of hiring level of what's happening on your existing clients has disappeared. But at that point, we've been sort of talking a lot on our crowdcast and with you guys as well. It's then looking at additional values or additional services that you can be actually adding on to your portfolio. And data is all about that as well. You could be saying, right, let's use this time to do a benchmark of you and your competitors. Well, listen, the talent's now gone global or European. If you've got areas that you have been struggling in the last year, and you could then look at, okay, in the last year you pull out, could be Firefish, any CRM, you go and say, right, what's your average time to hire? This is the time you've got, you've actually got the sort of strategic headspace to go and analyze that client and say, right, we've noticed that you've got an incredibly sort of difficult roles in these particular sectors that take us double the time to hire, because it's than your normal roles. Let's see if we can start to build up a talent pool to be proactive with that. Let's go and benchmark those sort of areas of where is that talent? Is it that there's a greater talent over in Madrid right now, or in Poland, or for those particular ones? Or should we be looking up in Scotland even from down south? Because actually, if that company is starting to sort of restructure as work from anywhere, remote hiring, all of that, that's change within their business that you can support as an existing business, existing client, and add much more value there. So really it's about thinking and putting yourself in that client's shoes and asking the question of, what are you trying to achieve right now? What are your stakeholders, your managers trying to actually ask you about? And how can I support you? Back to what Paul was saying when he went in-house. If a recruiter can make Paul look great in front of his managers, then Paul's going to have a friend for life there in that recruiter.
I was going to say, Wendy, you started off earlier on by saying that you make money from leads, and I thought you were only talking to Howard, because obviously where he's based. But I was thinking for the rest of us, that aren't based in Leeds and what.
Thanks, David.
Stick to recruitment, strictly recruitment pie.
They looked at their long tail. They looked at the long tail of clients that they hadn't spoken to for a long time, and they came up with a little data set of 3 questions, 3 sets of data, and they sent that out to the long tail of the clients they hadn't spoken to for some time, and that got them 5 new clients in a month. Yeah. And I'm sure that there are people on this call who have got clients who are probably now more prospects because they haven't really done much with them, but maybe they made a permanent placement 5 years ago or 3 years ago, and they could go back using what limited data they may have on those clients and refresh that relationship.
In many ways, the pandemic will be a blessing to this, to us all. And this is a weird thing to say, because in terms of a business, not obviously health-wise and etc. And once everybody got through the shock of what was happening, this is a time. When does a business owner get a time to step away from their business, think about it in a different way, and actually be strategic with those clients? When was the last time that you actually went and looked at your top? Everyone thinks they do business with an awful lot more companies every year than they really do. So when was the first time they've been able to actually go in and say, right, on the last 3 years, what's the value of each client that the business has come from, and how many contacts do we have? Where's our depth in account management structure? And I'm sure you guys have got, as part of your jump consultancy, a metric in terms of how much depth you have and exposure into that company. It's a great time to be mapping those companies. But likewise, I'm always about sort of really, as you said, I think, Howard, too, there's loads of data, and it's about how you use the data, not to get overly sort of paralyzed with the data, because that can happen as well. It's drilling down on what's important, and what's important is who also has got money in the bank, who also is going to grow when this comes out. So it's looking back, but chase the money. All right, let's go and find who's actually going to grow, what sectors are growing, And likewise, use the data that's available on like Due Dill or Company Check. That's free as well, and it's in beta. Go and see who's got money in the bank, because those are the ones that are going to be growing, and match that data with your internal data to go and target.
When we start to look at that, is, that's some of the things I'm going to be talking about this afternoon in a boot camp that I'm running this afternoon, about mapping your client data, because everyone thinks that their biggest client may be their best client, when that isn't necessarily the fact.
Yep.
One of the questions that came in was, how do I know which information I should be gathering for the future? How do I decide what data I shouldn't be recording? Well, the problem is that every client's different, because business doesn't have set rules. In football, what the set rules are and how to win the game, and they measure now data on all sorts of different things: the players' capabilities, how far they've run, how many passes they've made, how many times they've breathed, how many times they've flicked their hair back, whatever it is they measure on football, but they measure the whole lot. So we've got to look at that and say that the more we measure, the more we can actually put out to the clients, because what one client might like that, the other client might hate that. But if you've got all of it in there, you've got to make sure that you're measuring anything that's relevant to your client, as you said. So it's about getting the data out there and using it appropriately. So the biggest way to answer that question is, go ask your clients what data they want. Go ask what the data that your clients need, and then produce that data, whether you're producing it from your own data set or whether you're going out to people like the REC, ABSCO, whether you're using other data providers. Gather that data in, because most of that data at the moment is free. If you look at LinkedIn, there's so much data being thrown out on LinkedIn by some of these organizations that you can scrape and use, then it's a crime if you're not, really.
I totally agree with that, but the only thing I would suggest is that sometimes you can also build your credibility by asking the client, why do they want that as well, rather than just what do you want? Because I do feel that, the data that somebody was looking at a year ago is not the data that they need to be looking at now. So in order to actually ask why, that's how I do it. Like, I'll give you an example as well. Yesterday, I had a metrics meeting with my team yesterday, and they were coming up with again, we measure like our cost to acquire, cost to serve, and the three being keen, where the lifetime value of our customers, right? Now, somebody else was trying to chuck in like retention rate of a percentage per month as well. And the retention rate was coming out like 100+ on us. Now, I'm not meaning this, it's just because our churn rate is actually really, really low. So using that sort of standard SaaS metric of a retention rate was not relevant to our business, because it just didn't make sense. And seeing something that's 100+, yes, the formula of getting that sort of metric is probably correct, but it's not relevant for that business. And looking at just simplifying it down, you can get so overly complicated with data. And I think clients sometimes also need help to actually understand what they should be looking for data. And that's where, again, you can start to charge consultancy rates. A half-day consultancy to go in and actually analyze what would be helpful, linking that sort of what are your business goals, and translating that into how to measure those goals is something that a lot of in-house recruitment teams need. And I'm getting asked for that from a lot of in-house teams just now as well, to help them actually figure out what to look in the data and how to record and measure their outcomes.
And I think, Wendy, when you talk about existing clients and using the metrics, we often talk to clients about how important it is to get in front of clients. I know that's a bit difficult right now, but virtually or one-on-one, and setting up monthly, quarterly, half-yearly, annual discussions, providing metrics, providing measurable metrics is really a great way to set up those conversations. And coming up with a dashboard that is relevant to that organization, to your point, discussing the things that have gone well, the things that need to be reviewed, and so forth. We used to do this back in my old days at Office Angels with clients all of the time, and we were consistently telling them things about their business that they did not understand, they hadn't seen. Now, I think that adds enormous value, and it also provides the opportunity to start to talk about upselling or cross-selling, which I think is absolutely clearly what you're making reference to. And for me, this is where it comes from. It comes from the data. It comes from making sure that you're providing relevant data and information that they perhaps don't see. Sometimes they can't see the wood for the trees, shall we say.
Paul shared on our crowdcast exactly that. Sorry, not Paul. Yes, the other Paul. Yes, Paul Jacobs and Paul Sharp. Paul shared that exactly thing. I know. I'm like, I'm not getting involved. Paul shared exactly that. Paul Jacobs, in terms of, and he shared a really nice trick of, he went in and said, do you know that you hire X amount of people from this company and X amount of people from that company, and where your exit rate of people that are leaving your company, they're going to this company. And it was all in LinkedIn, and it's just using that insight, joining the dots. Awesome, you know. And any HR company in there would be like, I never knew that. Wow, you're a data god.
Yeah,
but I think what that's about then.
Sound-wise, just a little bit. We've just tailed off there. Lost a bit of volume. I think you're absolutely right. I think the other thing, which I think I shared on the podcast, might not have done, was just in terms of that service reviews. I think sometimes we don't do enough service reviews because we don't think we've enough to talk about. But there is so much data that we can. And I'll just give one other tip away, which is I always used to talk to clients around ratios and the recruitment cycle. So you can, through your database, you can measure the time to hire. You can break it all down into, this is how long we had, this is how long it took your hiring managers to come back. So you can get into a really healthy debate, and it becomes very objective because it's around data rather than emotion and subjectiveness. And the last one I'll just say is a lot of organisations, not all, but a lot of organisations are now talking about, diversity and inclusion is coming back on the agenda. Now COVID is just sort of tailoring off a little bit in terms of topic of conversation. And if you've got really good data, you can then have a really meaningful conversation with your client around things like diversity and inclusion. So it's using your data to align it back to what the business objectives are, and you being seen that you're supporting the business objectives rather than just turning up and saying, can we talk about your resource forecast plan for next year? No, you can't. Let's talk about how you're going to help the business meet its objectives. I think that's really key for me.
It is, Paul, and one of the areas we've looked at we've had actually, because we had quite a few clients, and one of my clients was actually Clydesdale Bank, so they were over in Belfast, so they had to have a lot of diversity and equality monitoring, anybody over in Northern Ireland, so we were quite well advanced in terms of that equality, diversity monitoring. But one of the biggest things that I think a lot of your audience would have is that you're going to be getting more tenders out for, volume, SLAs, PSLs, everything else on it, and how strong your submission to get onto these sort of supplier lists can be in terms of showing innovation, showing how you're able to record that just to click a button. It's easy for you, it's all there, but that will probably be that could win you that deal, just by giving you, these are the things that we've come up with in doing. 100%. So it's very, even if you actually, they never ask for it, a lot of people know that it's there and they can use the technology that they've got access to win future clients as well.
100%. And all the last 5 tenders that I've written, Wendy, over the last 3-4 months, a lot of it's been based around data in your CRM. Mm-hmm.
So when we sort of look at that, what we had last week on was someone talking about AI and the advancement of AI. But what they said was, where AI stops and recruitment starts is that ability to tell the story, that ability to change that data into something that the clients will buy. And that's when that transfer of enthusiasm comes in, that sort of talking about how you sell things. So we're talking very much about, using data to help build our existing client base. What we should also be looking at is how we use data to build new services into our clients, and what data can do to help us develop new services within our own recruitment agencies that we can then forward sell to clients. Is that an area that you found that your clients have been coming back to you, Wendy, and looking at how they can use data to create new services to their clients?
Yeah, there's been a big emphasis on sort of repackaging services. I think I sort of mentioned before as well. So it's looking at, you could be mapping how many candidates could even find them online right now, because that's the only way that a candidate's going to be able to find them. So you can do use data sort of analysis on all of that. And it's just using tools and technology in order to provide answers. And I think your point there, Howard, in terms of data as stories is exactly where, like, that's the sort of theme. That was actually what I was going to, if the expo had been on this year, that was my top, is turning data into stories, because it simplifies it, and it's using the data and it's bringing it to life and then moving that through a journey. And I think that's really important in terms of, if your audience is out there thinking, right, great, I can go and use my CRM to get me relevant data. I then have to work out what data to go and pick out. I then can go and make it visual. That's great for my clients. But then it's about embedding this into a cultural side of the business of how do your recruiters then actually tell the story of the data, because that's your sales.
I think it is. And I think, go on, Dave.
I was going to say, many of our clients, not recruiters, but the clients will have research and development departments, R&D, which is all about looking at what they can develop, what they can offer in terms of research. And I've often thought from a recruiter point of view, we have enough data. We have enough data, information on what's going on in the market that we could have someone dedicated to what we would call R&D. And that can be a service, a new service that we can offer to clients. How we go about doing that could depend on the sector, could depend on how many staff you've got within your business. But there's nothing wrong with a recruitment company having an R&D person.
Absolutely. And actually, it sort of comes to one of the questions that I think it's Annette, is it? And it's cut off, I'm sorry, in terms of the actual person that asked that, but it was like, it's the consultants who add the data to the CRM, but who's the best person to retrieve it and collect it? Is it an R&D person? Is it a marketing person in order to create the collateral? And I think that is a great question, because I think it's everybody's responsibility to create the data, to make sure that the data is valuable and to understand that value. So it's almost making them accountable. Okay, so I'll touch on that and I'll come back on that in a wee sec. But I do think that having a dedicated person in terms of either a marketeer or the person that's going to come up with the stories in terms of actually using that data, it's better to have that, with one person collating that, creating that collateral to then centralize that out and keep the consistent message. Working as a team with data is so much more powerful than individual telling different stories, if you think about it like that. If everyone's telling the same story, it's like your brand, then that's where you can then get great return in, because you're working together to get that through. Just to go back then in terms of how you use your recruiters and your consultants on that, and this really helps the big problem of, getting the data in, making sure your recruiters are keeping that data correct, and then actually producing, because that is the key here, isn't it? Producing all this great stuff is based on the recruiters actually getting the data in the first place. So we've been working with a lot of our customers to make sure that they're changing their weekly meetings. Okay, so actually managing through the CRM in terms of your weekly meetings, it's become so much easier to do because you're all on Zoom or you're on Teams. So you can just flick from person to person and they can tell their story in a set structure of what happened last week. What jobs are they then going to be working on and tailoring down? It gives you a great way of coaching that recruiter in terms of what's your forecast, how are you feeling about that forecast? But what it's also doing is actually making sure that that data is then correct, kept up to date, and all the stats that you're all looking at, it gives that sense of accountability to make sure that the data going in is correct, because that's how you're getting measured on a weekly basis, which then gives that one person the ability to pull off really great, powerful stuff that you can then sell and believe in. So I think that's quite important. Thanks for the question.
I think it's important when we start to look at that is that, as data comes in, there's an old IT term called Gigo, garbage in, garbage out. And so if you put garbage in, you're going to get garbage out of your system. And I remember sort of working with a number of clients who were, what you'd say when you looked at the data were the best recruitment people in the world, because at 9:01, they had a job on. At 9:02, they had 3 CVs out to that job. At 9:03, they had 3 interviews for that job. And at 9:04, they placed that job, because they just put the data on as and when they'd finished, because that was part of a KPI or part of the reason to get paid. Where really, if you put your data on in real time, it gives you so much more information, because what we talk about when we talk about building new services into clients, and what we talk about is that the next question is about how we help clients streamline their recruitment process. This is where that type of data now becomes really important. And when we start to go back to clients and say, do you realize that your staff spend 6 hours, monitoring this, or 8 hours doing this, or 3 days doing that, or what have you, we can start to reduce the overall timescale of recruitment, which reduces recruitment by huge costs, rather than trying to, take a percentage off our fees, etc., to try and give the client a benefit. We could give a far more financial benefit if we could cure their bottlenecks and solve their bottlenecks. Is this something, again, that your clients have been asking for when they're looking at how to extract data from systems?
It's something that I haven't seen a great sort of move to yet, because I just don't quite think yet the larger companies are up to just managing the cycle again quite so much. So it's definitely something that has been in the past, but I haven't seen the movement over it. What I'm still seeing is mapping customers out and seeing what the potential in terms of who they're going to be focusing on right now. But it's not to say that I'm sure. I would probably say that will start to come back in May, that people will then start to actually look at their whole life cycle in terms of looking at the sort of efficiencies through that. That's kind of where I would position that demand coming through. And you're absolutely correct. It's like it's like having the answers to the questions. So I know that Farfetch has, I don't know about the CRMs, but Farfetch has about 45 standard reports. And what we've done there is it's sort of, if you go looking then for an answer, then a question, then we should be able to give you the answer automatically. So when you were talking about your time to hire, absolutely, you want your time to hire and to be able to query in terms of different divisions or different roles, but you also want your time that you're, on the other side is your clients to see how long they left a candidate stranded. So that time in terms of each of your candidates, because data is brilliant because it's black and white. There's no getting around it. So, that is a very powerful message. If you've got 5 hiring managers in the one company and you know that one of them never comes back with feedback, then somebody in there's got to care about that, and you can demonstrate it in terms of the report, and you just send the report over, and it basically, everybody's got like 14 days, 50. There's a problem there, and you don't need to say anything. They would just be able to take that up and look at how do they make it efficient. So there's obviously time that's measured. Then there's the ratios in terms of your roles that in terms of the quality of hire, if you like that, in terms of number of CVs to interviews, and the standard ones that we were very comfortable with. I think where I am seeing a more focus is source of candidates, that real point of click right through from your website coming through to placement, because effectively, if you can demonstrate as an agency that the majority of your roles right now are coming from your own database, that is hugely powerful, because your clients can't get access to your database unless they are using you. So that's something really to be working on, because everybody perceives, let's say they can't, everybody perceives they can get data off a job board or off LinkedIn, and they've got access to everybody. So I think that is coming in, if that helps, Howard, in terms of a bit more of a demand, is that source sort of story as well.
Well, I think it's all those things that you can go back to clients. I scraped some data from a really big report back in September, and it was giving the top things that clients are looking for from a recruitment agency. Mm-hmm. And the first thing was to reduce the overall cost of recruitment. The second thing was, and this is what made me actually sit down and giggle quite loudly, was the client wants to improve the candidate's journey through the recruitment process. And when you start to think about those two things as the most powerful things that clients want to do out of the top 10, then all of a sudden you start to realize the data you have that can help them streamline that recruitment process and also increase their EVP across their candidate network by giving them the candidate a better journey going through that recruitment process. 7 on that list was to make better decisions based on data, to do more due diligence on their recruitment process and their candidates. So it was really interesting how most of it was linking back to what data we can provide back to the client to help them actually improve those type of things. Because I think all clients are looking at ways that they can reduce their overall cost, but not reduce their overall quality. So if you're a really quality provided agency, but suddenly a client wants to drop you by 5%, you're going to say no, where your poor agencies will probably say yes. So if you can show them ways to drive, their costs down without that, then all of a sudden you become primary to them. And as you say there, if you can then show them that most of your placements come from your database, so you're not going to find these candidates elsewhere, then that becomes a very, very powerful message across to your clients.
It does, Howard. And yeah, I mean, I think that's the whole thing in terms of we're called, I mean, I think jargon is a good thing. And, you know, gosh, the HR world uses jargon amazingly. And we don't use it that amazingly in the recruitment sector. You know, I actually think that our job now is not just recruitment, it's talent. And I know that's using a jargon word there, but it suddenly changes the perception that, you know, you're a talent consultant or talent executive, and you're thinking more holistically around that, not just the recruitment of a CV, because you're absolutely right. All of these surveys basically say, we want to reduce the spend from agencies, right? That's a given. We all know it. We've all been living there. But then they also have all of these problems with recruitment. And if you actually think about in-house, you know, how much hiring they have to do in order to, sorry, I've got this. Sorry, apologies. How much hiring they have to do, how much branding they have to do on their website, how much internal stakeholder, interviewing, selection, all of those tasks, they cannot cope with it. They do need support. It's just somehow it's positioning it differently to support them rather than just recruitment.
Yeah. Agreed. I think, you know, you said it very well, Wendy, earlier. I think we need to be, and we've been preaching about this for some time now, be consultants. And what you've said very succinctly here is it's so much more that we can offer our clients in relation to assisting them with this process, with the recruitment process, over and above providing great candidates. And when you do that, you know, then we can then talk about increasing fee levels, because ultimately it's not just about, you know, moving towards the situation where you own the client in terms of the opportunities, but also perception is reality. If you're providing a better service, then you should be charging more money for it.
I think it's interesting, and as you talk about that way, I worked with a client for an awful long time, helping them change their business model. And I banned them saying that we are recruitment consultants.
Well done, Howard.
And said, you go on and say that you are a headhunter and see what difference you get. And they said it was really strange how much more receptive candidates were and clients were to that. When you're then once inside the client talking about talent acquisition rather than
it's the
process
process rather than recruitment. Exactly.
Yeah, it becomes a very different
really
thing.
Good. It is.
We do suffer from imposter syndrome in our industry.
We do, don't we? And we shouldn't.
That off. Yeah,
gosh, you know what? The most talented people, exciting, energetic, most resilient people are recruiters. I love the sector, and we are shit hot at what we do. So we should actually be starting to listen to ourselves
well
there.
Well said, Wendy. And we're also the most attractive industry by way of looks and intelligence.
Definitely.
Paul, can you just turn your camera off, please, a moment? You're just hurting people's eyes there. Wendy, that has been, as you describe it there, shit hot. So thank you very much. It's been once again a very enlightening way of looking at our data and how we can use that late data, because I think it's so important as the recruitment market grows up and keeps maturing, that we keep in advance of what's actually going down the line, so we can keep in touch with our clients more and more. So Wendy, thank you very much once again, much appreciated for your time. As always, very, very insightful. Next week, we're going to look at how the wisdom of using data can influence your whole community, and the value of data insight when we start to market out to our community to procure candidates and clients and increase your market brand awareness. So please join us again next week. Once again, this has been Jump Advisory Recruitment Discussion. Wendy, thank you very much. Guys, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for this week. I look forward to seeing you all next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Wendy. Bye-bye.